story was two chickens, a lady and a goat to be named later.
That I want to do.
Wow, thank you, Erez. Erev Tov and welcome. I'm Rabbi Lisa Kingston from Peninsula Temple, Bethel. While I wish I could welcome you all into our newly renovated building, I'm just as grateful that we have the opportunity to be together as a North Peninsula community here on Zoom. Last year, when we observed Yom HaShoah, we were just figuring out this technology. And now commemorating in this way, again, we have a wonderful moving evening in store. I want to begin by saying thank you to the Yom HaShoah Planning Committee, who worked tirelessly to vision and implement our program for this virtual year. On behalf of our broad community, I welcome everyone to the annual North Peninsula Jewish Community Yom HaShoah v'HaGevurah commemoration. I'm going to begin with some housekeeping details. This is a service for all of us to participate in ways that feel meaningful. For some, it may mean that you create a space in your home where you can find sanctuary, to bring in your yahrzeit candle, to bring pictures or other memories into that space. And for others, it may mean to be present, but with your video off so that you can be more focused. And I'll ask that everyone please keep yourselves on mute, but experiment with reading out loud or singing aloud with our cantors in your living room, as long as it's on mute to us. And of course, to participate, you'll want to access the full program booklet with our martyrs' names, biographies, songs, and liturgy. And it can be found right in our chat box with a link there or on the PJCC website, pjcc.org/Yom HaShoah. You can download it there. If you didn't bring a yahrzeit candle and you plan to light one along with us, I invite you to get it now because you'll have the opportunity right after our welcome. The theme of our program this evening is Strength and Hope, Emerging from the Darkness. We acknowledge the contrast of this dark period in our history against stories that inspire us to hope again. In memory, there's the promise that we can rise above the darkness of our people's experience of the Holocaust to celebrate life's beauty. This beauty is what strengthens us together as a peninsula-wide group. Personally, I find light in the privilege of teaching about the Holocaust to our 6th grade students at Peninsula Temple, Bethel. Each year, we challenge ourselves to face this period of history when Jews lost civil rights, places of worship and learning, homes, families, jobs, and lives at the hands of the Nazis. And inevitably, year after year, students ask, why didn't anyone help the Jews? Why didn't anyone speak out? And so we study the famous poem by Pastor Martin Niemöller. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. The Shoah, or the systematic attempt to annihilate the Jewish people, forever haunts our community, while also offering us inspiration to act for justice. So we study this poem and we ask, who needs us to speak out now? Never again is not just a slogan, but a call to action for Jews to stop hatred of all kinds. This year, we saw so much hatred in our human community. And so we recommit ourselves to speak out for our Black brothers and sisters living in the streets for justice, asking for protection from those in our country whose mission it is to protect and serve. I speak out for Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, asking not to be scapegoated, stereotyped, or marginalized in our American life. And we speak out for our transgender community, who simply want basic human dignities, the same honor for our bodies that are a basic human right. Those are just some people who need us to speak out now. Celebrating life's beauty today means to celebrate the diversity of our community. It means thinking about how to welcome all, to remind everyone that they are safe, that their souls matter, and that we'll speak out for one another even if we are not each other. There can no longer be them or us. We're humanity together, striving for justice, striving to say and to affirm life is beautiful. Tonight we remember. This commemoration is our opportunity to remember those who perished as well as to honor the survivors amongst us. We'll hear stories, we'll read names, we'll return our hearts to the darkness in our history. But when we finish, there will be light. We will be the voices of those who need a chorus to sing together in beauty. We'll begin this evening with our procession of survivors. As we bear witness, I invite everyone to hold all survivors, those with us and those no longer with us, with loving kindness in our hearts.
I am lighting this candle in memory of the 23 people of my family, the Bars and Roselaar family, who were murdered in the Holocaust.
Yes.
Oh, all right, love you.
Hi, my name is Dahlia, and I will be presenting Ada's story. Ada was not yet a toddler when all of the Jews in Yedinitz, Russia, were forced to leave their homes. Her house was seized along with everything inside of it. Even the extra blankets her mother tried to grab as they left were taken. As Ada and her family and the Jews of the town were marched past a cornfield, a Nazi plane was heard overhead. Ada began to scream, and in fear that the Nazis above might hear, her mother Zelda pushed Ada to the ground and threw herself on top of her to quiet her yells. This is the first of many memories of her Holocaust experience. When they arrived at Marafa Ghetto, Transnistria, they were placed in a single-family home with many other families all shoved together. Food and water were scarce, and Ada cried constantly. The others bitterly complained until Zelda asked to be moved to another building. The family was moved to a shack that had been a cigarette kiosk before the war. It would be this shack that saved the family. Although the kiosk was only 5 feet by 5 feet, it soon became home to them. There was a small rug, and it was soon discovered that underneath the rug was a hatch. Lifting the hatch revealed a storage space that was cold and dark, but it was the perfect place to hide each time the Nazis came through the ghetto to choose men to take to the labor camps. Ada vividly remembers one time they went into hiding when her leg got caught on a nail and began to bleed. They stayed down there for what seemed like hours, and by the time the Nazis left, her clothes were drenched in blood. Her mother asked why Ada hadn't said anything, and her response was, "I didn't make a sound. I was a good girl." When the ghetto was finally liberated, the family went to Romania and Ada started school. From there, they decided to move to Israel, but the British intercepted the ship they were on and they were taken to an internment camp in Cyprus. After a little over a year, they were released from Cyprus and finally able to go to Israel, where Ada lived until she was 16 years old. She eventually moved to California, where she had 3 children and 5 grandchildren. I am the youngest of those grandchildren. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alexa Friesel. I'm a sophomore in high school, and for this project, I interviewed my great-grandmother, Gabriella Stern, about her experience during the Holocaust. A woman walks into a room. Seeing the walls are painted yellow, her eyes begin to fill with tears. Why? My great-grandmother, Gabriella Stern, was born in Fegermat, Hungary in 1930. The first few years of her life were comparable to any child today. She spent her days in school and spent lots of time with her family, playing games, practicing Judaism, and living out her childhood. Her whole world turned upside down in 1944 when the Nazis took control of Hungary. My great-grandmother was just 14 years old, very close to my age today. First, it was the yellow stars pinned to her clothing. Then, she and her entire family were forced to move to the ghetto at Debrecen. In the ghetto, the Nazi officers took many of her family's personal possessions and forbid them from practicing Judaism. Oftentimes, she would have to watch as the Nazi soldiers beat the ghetto's residents. However, this didn't stop Gabriella's family from practicing their traditions in secret. Some months later, my great-grandmother and her entire family were deported to Auschwitz aboard a cattle car. On the train, she had no way of accessing food, water, or even a restroom. After a long journey, Gabriella, her sister, and her mother were separated from her father. She would later learn that he was shot and killed. Upon arrival, my great-grandmother realized that most of the children were being sent to die. In German, she lied about her age and she promised to be a good worker. Her intelligence and quick thinking in that moment saved her life, and she, her sister, and mother were not sent to die. However, her struggles in Auschwitz did not end there. They had little clothing, food, and water. Diseases spread like wildfire due to the incredibly unsanitary living conditions. I cannot even begin to imagine what it must have been like to live in a place like this. After a few months in Auschwitz, my great-grandmother was moved to a German concentration camp named Ravensbrück, and then later to a camp called Barth. In Barth, she was forced to work for countless hours in a factory building bombs for the Nazis. Many of the workers did not survive this laborious work. My great-grandmother stayed strong and kept on working until the end of the war. My great-grandmother has inspired me in countless ways. From her story, I have learned to never take anything for granted, to have courage, and to stay strong when I'm fearful or feel hopeless. In one of the world's darkest chapters, she had hope. Thank you.
Sag nicht kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Chotsch Himmeln bleiene, verstellen bläue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abheugt und zertrott, wir seinen da. Von grünem Palmenland bis weißen Land von Schnee. Wir kommen an mit unser Bein, mit unser Weh. Und wo gefallen ist der Spritz von unser Blut, sprotzen wird dort unser Gewurah, unser Mut. Und wo gefallen ist der Spritz von unser Blut, sprotzen wird dort unser Gewurah, unser Mut. Es wird die Morgensonne begierden uns dem Heind, und der Nächten wird verschwinden mit dem Feind. Nur heute versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor, wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von dort zu dort. Nur heute versammeln wird die Sonne in dem Kajor, wie a Parol soll gehen das Lied von dort zu dort. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Sie ist nicht kein Liedl von Erfolg, läuft er frei. Das hat der Volk zwischen Fallen die gewähnt. Das Lied gesungen mit ner Gannes in die Hand. Das hat der Volk zwischen Fallen die gewähnt. Das Lied gesungen mit ner Gannes in die Hand. Da sag nicht kein Mal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Chotsch Himmeln bleiene, verstellen bläue Tag. Kommen fett noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abheugt und unser Trott, wir seinen da. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abheugt und unser Trott, wir seinen da.
Hi, my name's Gabrielle Melamed, and I interviewed Ava Jelen. Ava was born in Berlin, Germany in 1925. Her family had lived in Germany for a long time and had never considered leaving before Hitler came into power. When she was 12 years old, Ava's life changed forever. On November 9th, 1938, Kristallnacht, Ava and her family decided to pack up their things and take a train to Italy to avoid the worst that was yet to come in Germany. Each person in her family was allowed to take $10 and one suitcase. Ava's family stayed in Italy for 10 days before they took a ship to China. Although most Jewish immigrants that fled to China lived in Shanghai, Ava's father met somebody that told him about a Navy town in China at the time called Tsingtao. Her family moved there and did housekeeping for the soldiers that lived at the Navy base in exchange for a home. In Tsingtao, Ava and her family enjoyed a good and comfortable but very remote life. Ava went to school at a convent where she learned English and French. Her family continued to keep Jewish holidays, but did so in the privacy of their home. Only about 20 families lived in Tsingtao, some of whom included Russian Jews. Jews in China were not allowed into hospitals, so when Ava got appendicitis, an English medical student had to perform her surgery at a nearby home. After living in Tsingtao for 9 years, Ava and her family moved to Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. They lived there for 3.5 months until they were finally able to move to the United States. Ava's family immigrated to San Francisco, California in 1949. Fortunately, because Ava had learned to speak English while living in China, it was not difficult to find a job. Ava worked at the Bank of California and met her husband in San Francisco. They moved to Truckee after their children were born, where they especially enjoyed skiing. Ava later moved back to the Bay Area and is now blessed to not only have 5 children, but 15 grandchildren and several great-grandchildren. I feel very privileged to have been able to meet and learn about Ava's life. Despite the hardships she endured, she remains an inspiration and prominent member of our Jewish community.
My name is Maya, and I interviewed Abraham Masboim. I've always admired my great-uncle Abraham for not only his success in business and life, but also the courage it took for him to get there. As he told me recently, he had no childhood, but instead became a man the day his family left Poland for Ukraine. They escaped just days before the Germans arrived to attack their village. After arriving in Ukraine, because of Abraham's father, Yosef's glass, metal, and woodworking skills, the family was sent to a Russian work camp in Siberia. They traveled for many cold months until their destination, where they cut trees through the freezing winter of 1940. The family was given 1 kilogram of bread a day, but this was not enough for a growing boy. Abraham was a good student and was approached by a Russian boy who wanted to be tutored. Abraham struck a deal with him that he would get a hearty sandwich each morning as pay for his tutoring sessions. His fight to survive was ignited. The family was able to travel to Uzbekistan in early 1941, just as the local government had begun sending Jews as soldiers in the war. Yosef's skills proved useful in the local community, so he was allowed to stay and work in the area. Abraham and his brother Yitzchak took after their father and worked odd jobs to survive. Though the odd jobs sustained them, Abraham knew it wasn't enough, so he added his own way of making money. He would hop onto trains and steal as much food and other materials as he could carry and sell it in the local market. In 1945, 4 years after their arrival in Uzbekistan, Abraham's sisters Sonia and Manya were born. 2 months later, the war had come to an end and the family decided to return to their Polish village. The town they once loved now hated their Judaism. Whispers of a new Jewish country began, and the family decided to make Aliyah. At the border between Poland and Germany, 9-year-old Abraham and his 8-year-old sister Chaviva were separated from the family for 6 months until they were reunited and moved back to Fritzlar, Germany, where they awaited their departure. On January 29th, 1949, Abraham set foot in Israel for the first time. Today, Abraham is 87 and lives in Israel with his 3 children, 7 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. Though he had no childhood, he has filled mine with memories of joy, laughter, and lessons of perseverance.
Eli, Eli, שלא ייגמר לעולם, החול והיקם, רישרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם, החול והים, רישרוש של המים, ברק השמיים, תפילת האדם. Oh Lord, my God, I pray that these things never end. The sand and the seas, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the seas, the rush of the water.
waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart.
I'm Ronnie Kletter, and I interviewed Livia Grunfeld. Livia was born in the small town of Micula, Romania on June 10th, 1925. She was the seventh of 10 children, having 5 brothers and 4 sisters. Her father worked as a landowner, and her mother was a homemaker, and their family was quite Orthodox. At 18 years old, Livia traveled to Budapest by herself to visit her sister. While she was there, her father sent her a letter telling her to come home immediately because the Nazis had just invaded Hungary. The next day, she received another letter from her father telling her to stay in Budapest instead because it would be safer to be with her sister in a big city. A fateful decision. She stayed in Budapest and was able to get false papers as a Christian with a fake name. At the end of 1944, she was discovered and taken to the Budapest ghetto. While in the ghetto, she lived in a very small room with her sister and brother and about 15 others. Even though she was not trained, she worked as a nurse to help take care of elderly people. She remembers boys constantly being taken from the ghetto to camps and never seeing them again. She and her siblings survived by hiding in basements during airstrikes and eating bread with mustard. During my interview with Livia, she made clear that she would not have survived without the help of Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat. Wallenberg came to Budapest and saved roughly 20,000 Jews by giving them a Schutzpass, a documentation that granted them immunity and prevented their deportation. The Budapest ghetto was liberated on January 18th, 1945 by the Soviet forces. Following liberation, Livia traveled back to her home in Romania to discover that her parents and 3 of her siblings had been killed in Auschwitz. She was able to reunite with some family and friends, and in November of 1945, got married and moved to Satu Mare. There, she and her husband had 2 sons, and in 1964, came to the United States to live in Queens, New York. In 1978, she and her family came to Burlingame, California, to settle down near their friends, the Farkas family. Today, Livia is the last survivor of her family. She stays in touch with family in Israel, New York, and Washington, D.C., and is thrilled to have her grandson and great-granddaughter close by. It was an honor to interview Livia and hear her incredible stories, and I will ensure that they will never be forgotten.
In Jewish tradition, stones are placed on the grave of the deceased to honor their memory. In this ceremony, memorial stones are placed by descendants of survivors.
On this day, we remember those who did not survive and give thanks for those who did. In memory of helpless infants, children, and teenagers who were cut down like young trees before their time, before they had a chance to experience life. You are not forgotten. We place the stone in honor of our great-grandparents, Francis and Julius Bregman.
In memory of all the mothers who died with the children in their arms, you are not forgotten. I place this stone in honor of my great-grandmother, Etta Katz.
In memory of all the mothers and fathers who were cruelly separated from their families, you are not forgotten.
We placed a stone in honor of our great-grandparents, Max and Manya Hampel.
In memory of all scholars, teachers, rabbis, and religious leaders who were the first to be seized, you are not forgotten.
We place this stone in honor of our great-grandfather, Cyril Fishman.
In memory of the heroes of the resistance who fought the Nazis, so few against so many, you are not forgotten. I place this stone in honor of my great-grandfather, Paul Marx. In memory of the martyrs who gave their lives to help their brothers and sisters under the Nazis, you are not forgotten. I place this stone in honor of my great-great-grandmother, Hedwig Kaufmann Marx.
In memory and as a tribute to those of all faiths who were imprisoned or executed for their efforts to resist tyranny and to provide protection for their persecuted brothers and sisters. You are not forgotten. I place this stone in honor of my grandparents, Ilsa and Walter Stearman.
Friends, I invite you to rise physically and or spiritually for the memorial prayer El Maleh Rachamim. If you're able to do so, I'll ask you to remain standing for the few moments throughout the end of our service tonight. שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנטבחו ושנחנקו, ושנשרפו ושנהרגו, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם. ונאמר אמן.
יתגדל,
Auschwitz,
ויתקדש,
Sobibor,
שמי רבה,
Warsaw Ghetto,
על מה תברח חירותי,
Babi Yar,
וימליך מלכותי.
Kishinev,
בחייכון וביומכון,
Mauthausen,
ובחיי
Dachau,
תבכל בית
Vilna,
ישראל.
Majdanek,
בעגלה ובזמן קריב,
Buchenwald,
ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהא שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עלמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח,
Lions,
ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא.
Terrazin,
ויתהדר,
Drancy,
ויתעלה, ויתהלל.
Bergen-Belsen,
שמי דקודשה בריחו.
Ravensbrück,
לעולם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה.
Treblinka,
תושבחתה ונחמתה.
Belzec,
תאמירן בעלמה.
Boinia,
ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
יהא שלמה רבה.
Lowe's,
מן שמיה.
Grossrosen,
וחיים עלינו
Riga,
ועל כל ישראל.
Radom,
ואמרו
Amen.
עושה שלום במרומיו.
Triniki,
הוא יעשה שלום
Helno,
עלינו ועל כל ישראל.
Sachsenhausen,
ואמרו אמן.
Amen.
Each year, just before the conclusion of our Yom HaShoah commemoration, we join clergy and other community leaders in reciting the pledge to speak out against hate. Reciting the pledge seems especially important and meaningful now, as our country has witnessed a disturbing increase in hate speech and acts of violence against Jews, African Americans, and people of color, including most recently Asian Americans. Please remain standing if you are able, and join clergy and educators from our community in reciting the pledge together. Please join us for the pledge to speak out against hate.
We recognize that respect for individual dignity and equality is a non-negotiable responsibility of all people. We pledge to speak out against anyone who seeks to intimidate or actually hurt someone of different race, religion, ethnic group, or sexual orientation. We believe that one person can make a difference, and that one person can be an innocent bystander when it comes to opposing hate. From this day onward, we are stop violence because of hate, will hurt, harm, and violate the civil rights of anyone.
Please remain standing for singing National Anthem of Israel. Kol od balev penima, nefesh Yehudi homiyam, ulfatei mizrach kadima. Ein Lezion Sophia, od lovda tikvateinu, hatikva barshadot alpayim, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון ירושלים. להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון ירושלים.
you.